good morning once more, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for their trust. And at the same time, I admit that I was a little surprised by such a generous amount of time, which had its consequences. As you can see, I have slightly generalized the title of my lecture. I think I should, at the beginning, outline its structure for better orientation for us all. So, we will have an idea what to expect in coming minutes and maybe what to not. How can I go to the other? Which one? Just a sec. Maybe it's. Yeah, this is the structure. So I should press this.
Cursor.
The cursor, just the cursor. Okay, we will see. Yeah. First, I planned to give a brief introduction to the topic of ecology in Czech theatre. But I think I will skip this part because we would have too much of specific information, which is I think not necessary for this time. Maybe I can leave it for the printed version. Yeah, hopefully we will see. Next, or I will move just in the topic of cutting down trees. That's the topic of my contribution, and I will try to explain how I came up with it. And then I will attempt to trace the metaphor of trees on stage and its variants and transformations throughout history up to today's stage forms. So, try if it, okay. Let's skip this part. A strange coincidence led me to consider the metaphor of cutting down trees, and later on just trees on stage. As a part of Czech Alternative Theatre Festival 4+4 Days in Motion, which reflects the latest non-conformist phenomena of on the stage, the creative collective Varied Ideal performed in 2023 with a piece entitled, a little bit ironic, The Primeval Forest, or Who Will Spread the Pluck Now, whose central motive and in fact sole content was the cutting up of a felled tree trunk. In the same year that Norske Teatret staged Hail, a production with very similar content. A group of men on stage felled and cut up a respectably long trunk of a major tree. I do not consider this coincidence insignificant. I mean that these productions appeared in such distant European theatres in the same year without their creators knowing anything about each other. It testified to the pan-European resonance of the theme and the semantic richness of the metaphor of trees on stage. This coincidence led me to reflect more deeply on the metaphor of cutting down trees or trees as such on stage. And in the context of the conference theme and recent thinking about theatre, I eventually come to the question of whether we can also view trees on stage as a non-human actors. We will maybe we will hear more about this. Gaspar Trocha will also tell us on this topic, I think. So first, however, I will focus on the two productions themselves. So surprisingly similar, with many points of contact, but at the same time, different connotations. Both can be called performances. The performers carry out a strictly utilitarian, civilly conceived activity on stage in its entire unbridged real-time span. We can forget about any dramatic situation here. The audience must gradually give up all expectations of a twist, a plot, a punchline. It is somewhat reminiscent of the absurd situation of prolonged anticipating and waiting for Godot. In the end, it is really just about coexisting with unremarkable, explicitly unpointed cutting of a tree trunk and its slicing into logs. The actors do not play anything. They only try to serve the given purpose with appropriate effort. In both performances, this slow and concentrated activity itself, elevated to a theatrical event, can be frustrating for viewers, eager for constant change, twists, ideas and thoughts, or they can accept it as intentional, as a special genre that we could call a kind of slow theater. In Prague, in the provocatively minimalistic and simply performance, The Original Forest, or Who Will Spread the Plug Now, the whole process resembles a ritual to a certain extent. Performers dressed in a white shirt and black trousers carry out a log impressive size and weight onto the stage, carrying it together on their shoulders like a coffin. Their activity, without unnecessary words, resembles a funeral. It is perhaps only an allusion, and perhaps even too pathetic. It is much more a ritual of simple work. The actors do not act, or at least they try not to. They place the log on supports, cut it with chainsaws, then chop it on blocks with axes or with the help of a wood splitter, and stuck the logs into a pile. The natural sounds of work and machines are recorded and amplified by a sound engineer and musician present on stage using microphones, multiplied, further refined, and mixed with simulations of bird songs, natures, and other sounds, creating using a mixing console on the left foreground of the stage. The second part of this difficult and lengthy, almost contemplative, profane work is created by 3 actors wearing oversized plush masks. Maybe we will also see them. Yeah, these are some, depicting forest animals, a hare, a squirrel, and a dormouse. They watch the felling of the forest on a television screen in the background of the stage throughout the performance. This plan frames the entire performance. It begins, and after the completion of entire action, the performers, lumberjacks, leave first, followed slowly by the animals, after processing the logs into firewood. With a plastic bag in their hands and a cassette player, it's maybe here, playing the sounds of the forest, they no longer resemble authentic animals. Their childish portrayal contains a strange mixture of parody, sentimentality, and kitsch. The creators seem to be playing on the strings of environmental grief in an overly banal way. It is also evident in the text published about the performance. I cite, "For thousands of generations, human beings considered themselves part of a wider community of nature and cultivated active relationships with other people, animals, plants, and other natural phenomena, including the landscape and weather, which we have only recently begun to consider inanimate and soulless. How much work does it take to fell a tree, cut it up, and chop it into logs and chips? But where will the hare, squirrel, and dormouse find refuge while loggers ravage their homes? Love of nature in an era of increasing consumption of barbecue briquettes." So this is from the program to performance. In the performance, the perspective and portrayal of the animals balance on the edge of irony and seriousness, they are kind of counterpoint to the strictly purist, civilist, and in its tediousness and simplicity, almost absurd action on stage. With its native simplicity and directness, the entire performance is reminiscent of one of Zdeněk Miller's best short animated films about his world-famous mole, namely the iconic half-hour film with a timeless ecological message. In the genre of children's films, it has a surprisingly futuristic and surrealistic atmosphere, and since sincere pathos capturing and longing for nature and nostalgia for home. I mean the film, it's maybe here, The Little Mole in the City from 1982. Given the time of its creation and the political situation in socialistic Czechoslovakia, this film is remarkable for its clear and artistically uncompromising ecological message. I think we can have a short movie now. Just so you can watch it on YouTube all. It is really nice. Not even only for children. Yeah, so I will stop now. So we can move to the Norwegian performance, Hele Vekt, whose title can be translated as massive maybe. It is an idiomatic expression referring to solid wood, but also to the character trait of being able to withstand anything. And it is very similar in content, but at the same time, it is a good example of how the same metaphor, cutting down trees on stage, can carry a layer and diverse meanings. The ecological aspect is only one of them, and rather the secondary one at that. In Norway and the Nordic countries in general, wood has always been a key raw material for fuel. The performance program states, I cite, It was the difference between freezing and being warm. It was the difference between ore and iron, between raw meat and a steak. In winter, it was the difference between living and dying. That's how important wood was to the first Norwegians. Gathering fuel was simply one of the most important tasks, and the calculation was simple. If you had little, you froze. If you had too little, you died. And perhaps a few thousand years of frost and suffering have created a unique Nordic heating gen that people in warmer climates do not have. Barely 100 years of fan stoves and paraffin tanks have not been able to eradicate this reflex. And the joy many people find in gathering firewood may be due to the fact that the wood-burning gen is awakened, connecting us to the gatherers from whom we all descend. Cutting and chopping wood on stage thus carries a certain archetypal significance. We all have some kind of relationship, even in subconscious, with wood and trees, whether we are activists sounding the alarm and drawing attention to the climate crisis, or its deniers. Both performances built on this, with the Norwegian one focusing more on the theme of identity. Also, harmony with nature is certainly part of it in Norwegian men, for Norwegian men. The Norwegian performance is much more composite than the Czech one. It is based on a popular book, Wood, by writer Lars Smitting, from which I quoted a selected passage used in the program. In addition to practical advice for cottage owners and fireplace owners, the book summarizes what wood has historically meant to the inhabitants of the Nordic countries, describing traditions and legends associated with it, including completely contemporary stories. Its text is only fragmentarily incorporated into the production through voiceovers and subtitles. It is also inspired to a certain extent the songs composed especially for the performance by Norwegian singer and songwriter Torleif Stein Bjella. The songs sing about the value of slow, hard work in an overly fast-paced black digital sea. Again, from the program. But even the Norwegian performance is not without light-hearted humor. In songs based off Norwegian folk music and American country, Bjella gently pokes fun and fun at the stubborn and silence of lumberjacks and their distinctive dialects. In the production, he sings, plays the guitar, violin, double bass, accordion, and even chainsaw, and even performs with his own tractor, which he had to drive to Oslo from his hometown 200 kilometers away for this purpose. The sounds of working with wood effectively complement the musical slide of the production. I have one more picture from this. This unusual theatrical spectacle appeals to all senses. In addition to the catchy lumberjack music, there is the smell of wood, diesel and gasoline from chainsaws, and crackling fire lit right on the stage. The rawness and authenticity of all the components effectively contrast with the classic proscenium stage of the Norwegian National Theatre. This continues until the entire large birch trunk ends up as neatly stacked logs, known as hráň. This is a pile of timber with gaps between the logs intended for drying, which is an important part of Norwegian culture, as we can also read in Whitting's book. Girls in rural Norway used to choose their husbands based on the shape of this wood pile. As I have tried to describe, both performances, based on essentially the same idea of cutting and chopping a log into pieces, have a similar meaning in some respects and are also different in others. The common thread running through both productions is a certain, almost meditative mood, a deliberate, almost irritating slow down. We can also perceive them as a response to the general acceleration of a globalized society, overwhelmed by the technological development of communication media to the very limits of its capacity. Alongside the climate crisis, the effects of pandemic and military conflicts, this is another significant source of anxiety. As Norwegian social anthropologist Thomas Hilland Eriksen writes in his books, for example, The Tyranny of the Moment. Nordistic critic and translator Karolina Stehlíková wrote about the performance in Oslo this: the theatre artists create a kind of meditative space in which the audience is allowed to observe others performing quite monotonous but meaningful work while conducting their own dramatic monologues in their heads. This also applies to the Prague performance. The fact that nothing else happens on stage throughout the evening except cutting a tree trunk and splitting logs naturally provoked a controversial reaction. Critical reflection included both sharp rejection of, I cite, a simple, straightforward and completely useless action, or understanding and sympathy with its contemplative tone. The simple activity of the performers, lumberjacks in its real time, seeming even longer in the theatre time, opened up space in the minds of audience, unbound by the action on stage, for associations and their own thoughts. One of the bards of Czech theatre criticism, Karel Král, wrote on his blog that at that moment he had before his eyes the disappearing forests near his cottage. I cite him: I already have the impression that in this once green, now grey, thinning forest, it is not only the trees that are dying. It is not very habitable. Only parasites are demonstrably thriving there. For example, deer ticks, which began successfully driving even me out of our forest several years ago. Of course, I suspect that we are responsible for the destruction and that it would greatly help nature if people, the most dangerous parasites, left it alone. With its consistent simplicity, the Czech performance provoked some to resistance and others to contemplation. For example, about human parasites. What the Norwegians were contemplating, Odin knows perhaps their roots. And now, let me take a brief look at the history of the metaphor of cutting down trees or trees themselves in drama and theatre. Similar identity-forming function has the metaphor of cutting down trees, or one tree, in Henrik Ibsen's dramatic poem Per Gynt from 1867, in which the playwright sharply satirizes the character traits of the Norwegian people through the arrogant, self-satisfied, yet half-hearted and indecisive title hero. In the third act, Gint, or Per Gint, cuts down a tree deep in the forest. In the inclement grey autumn weather with snow falling, the entire first scene of the third act is devoted to this. Felling a tree is a symbol of confrontation with an obstacle. And in Gint's case, this confrontation is typically boastful or talkative. It has the character of a struggle with an opponent. Gint talks to the tree as if it were a character. He scolds it, addressing it as an ancient churl in a chain mail shirt, and boasting that we will have defeated it despite all its resistance. He comments on his struggle with the tree and its trembling branches. I sighed. "You're shaking your twisted arms." Then he realized that it's just a tree. He talks about hard work, about life in nature, about how difficult it is to be independent, self-reliant, left to fend for oneself. He reflects on his condition as an outcast out of normal society. The image points to a desire for autonomy, even a boastful determination to achieve it, but at the same time reveals that it is a hard, cruel path full of adversity. Gint experiences the obstacles with some excitement, giving them an almost personified dimension. The scene ends with a tree falling and Per cutting off its branches. The contrast is provided at the very end of the scene by the appearance of a young boy who cuts off his finger with a sickle to avoid the military service. Such a determinant solution, even if it's a matter of escaping responsibilities, is unavailable to Per, who distances himself from it. The metaphor of cutting down a tree has a special meaning here. It is more of a battle from Gint's perspective. The tree is actually a non-human actor with whom he engages in dialogue, almost in the manner of Don Quixote. This is also exaggeration, a certain demonization and personification of obstacles, as seen through the eyes of loud-mouthed, narcissistic pseudo-hero. When I think about it, it's the only moment in the dramatic poem where Per is somewhat of a decent person, or at least tries to be for a moment. But soon he runs away from work and from Solveiga. So woodcutting could be here also seen as an attempt to be a good, decent person. In a completely different way, worked with the metaphor of trees Anton Pavlovich Chekhov. If we think about the metaphor of cutting down trees on stage, it is certainly this playwright who gave it its K-dramatic form and hosts the cherry orchard we remember as the first and most striking example. Chekhov worked with the symbolism of trees already in his play Uncle Vanya from 1897, where the doctor Astrov, on the contrary, plants trees. Frustrated by his personal life, relationships, and material circumstances, he sees hope precisely in planting trees, in caring for the forest as a factual and symbolic possibility for growth and positive values. Significantly, his actions remain misunderstood and overlooked. But iconic is Chekhov's metaphor of cutting down trees in the chariot chart. It is from 1904, serving as a lyric condensation of entire tone of the drama. The orchard of old fruit trees on Ranjevskaya estate is a symbol of the past, tradition, aristocracy, beauty, not only when it bloomed, but also stagnation and unsustainability of the former lifestyle. The unseen but sensed image of the cherry orchard being cut down, which brings the drama to its climax, symbolize a painful blow to the roots, memory, and ideals. The dramatic note prescribes, I cite, they hear the sound of axes in the distance, cutting down the orchard. And Ranjevska then comments directly on stage, I cite, oh my dear, sweet, lovely orchard, my life, my youth, my happiness, farewell. At the same time, none of the characters could or knew how to change the situation leading to this outcome. The orchard, which no one could maintain anymore, became a burden for the in-depth family in a difficult existential situation. Its value was incalculable and difficult to explain in the pragmatic new era. The felling of trees symbolizes the end of the old aristocratic era, the demise of values, and the inability to adapt to the new era. Sentiment stemming from emotional attachment to the past, feelings of loss, and the desire for security and are confronted here with pragmatism based on the need to act actively, deal with the present, and plan for the future. But what can the future be without rules? Chekhov's metaphor of cutting down trees is imbued with a strong melancholy. A scenic depiction of trees being felled, expressed mainly through sounds and sometimes shadows, maybe I have here, according to the author's notes, but all the more powerful for it, evokes sadness and vulnerability. And also human weakness and the impossibility of holding on to everything we love. Also in Czech drama was the metaphor of trees frequently used with similar but also specific connotations. The motif of the tree plays a significant role in Alois Jirásek's drama The Lantern from 1905. We could even say that in this one of the most fundamental symbolic elements of the entire play, which was originally supposed to be called Our Linden Tree. It is clear from this that this specific traditional Czech national tree, a powerful symbol for the Czech nation, especially during the national revival in the 19th century, also carries these connotations in the drama. However, everything is wrapped up in a well-acceptable, non-ideologically garish, friendly tale drawing on old legends from the region and including supernatural beings in the play. The play is rightly called the Czech A Midsummer Night's Dream for its form, mood, and popularity. The main character, Miller, called Libor, comes into conflict with the authorities because he refuses to cut down an old linden tree growing on the land near his mill. The linden tree stands in the way of the Lord's new plans, blocking their view. Libor is the only one who rebels against this, even at the cost of personal consequences. I do not want to get bogged down here in describing the twists and turns and of a relatively rich plot full of symbolic meanings. For our topic, it is perhaps clear, even from a brief outline, that the linden tree in Lantern is one of the most striking examples of a tree as a symbol of freedom, tradition, and national identity in Czech drama. Historically, this motif resonated with the ideas of the national revival, which Jirásek helped to shape in his writing. In the visual design of production of drama, it therefore always appeared as a prominent central element of the stage, as you can see from this one from the National Theatre in Prague. It is from 1960s, 16 pardon. In the context of our modern reflections and the theme of other conference contributions, the linden tree can also be understood here as a non-human actor. Its existence and threat of extinction are the driving force behind drama. The scene around the linden tree is the conflictual climax of the play, the moment when it is decided who has the power, the authorities or a consciousness individual with an unyielding coincidence. Libor, the miller, defends the old, sprawling, majestic linden tree by the mill with the words, I cite, I will not cut down the linden tree. It has been growing here for ages, and it has a right to grow here. His unyielding defense shows that the tree is not just a thing, but a bearer of values, not unlike those attributed to trees in Chekhov's metaphor. The symbol of tree felling also appears, for example, in the last drama of the author of probably the most famous Czech realistic play, Marisha, namely the drama Anežka from 1912, which Vilém Mrštík wrote with his wife Božena Pacasová. It is an introspective play about the creative struggle, and I don't have any picture of it because we don't have any photos yet. It is an introspective play about the creative struggle of an artist who, in an existential struggle, becomes a craftsman producing artistically worthless artifacts and tries desperately to find his own expression in a polemically diversified field. The play also addresses the conflict between artistic creation and the responsibilities arising from a relationship. Another theme of the play, albeit more marginal, is the relationship between tradition and modernity. The introduction to the drama is noteworthy for our topic. The author note prescribes the evocation of felling of an old tree-lined avenue or alley. I cite, in the background we hear the blows of an axe and the rumbling of falling trees. The sound gradually grows louder until Anežka, which is the title hero, feels the weight of loss. The sound of the axe is an invisible actor that dramatically heightens the tension. The axe speaks instead of the characters. It is the voice of change and violence against nature and tradition. This activity is then commented on in dialogue itself. I cite, old farmer, how can they destroy our alley? These are trees that remember our forefathers. Young man, the new era demands its due. The alley will go, whether we like it or not. Aneška in a quiet voice. With every tree that is felled, a piece of us falls. This dialogue highlights the conflict between generations and values and sheds light on the sensitivity of the title character. Once again, the alley is not just a group of trees, but a bearer of identity and family history. In the Mrštík drama Aneška, the felling of alley is also a significant dramatic and symbolic element. In Chekhov's play, it was a powerful finale, while in Mrštík's play, it is a similarly significant overture. What they have in common is the cynically effective depiction of evocations. Actions that are not shown on stage, but are nevertheless unquestionable. The pathos and resonance of the symbol, cynically performed at the level of suggestion, is thus only reinforced. The sound of axes and falling trees functions as a quiet but powerful voice of change and destruction. The play uses this motif to deepen the theme of the loss of tradition and resistance to the superficial, barbarically heartless modern world. Similar to Chekhov's Cherry Orchard or Jurassic's The Lantern, trees represent a symbolic, fragile link between the past and the new era. The symbolic potential of tree-lined or alleys, which mark old roads as connecting links, can also be found in Ibsen's The Lady from the Sea, it's play from 1888. Here the avenue is not cut down, but stands as an important space of transition. The entire drama is introduced by the stage note, I cite, beyond a road along the shore, an avenue of trees along the road. Between the trees are seen the fjord, high mountain ranges and peaks. The alley, which connects the house or garden with the sea, plays a significant symbolic role here. It is a transition from the outside world to the inner space of the drama, a channel through which the past flows back into the present. A path along which comes a challenge that shakes the existing balance. The stranger, who is the embodiment of Elida's suppressed past, comes this way. And the avenue or the alley is thus also the space through which that past enters the present. The alley is also a passage to freedom. Elida is the lady of the sea, married into the interior, but her inner identity remains connected to the wildness and freedom of the seaside. The alley is therefore a passage, a safe place where she can choose between these words. Another example of three, do I have some more time? 5 minutes, I think I will finish soon. So this is probably the last example. of tree symbolism can be found in Samuel Beckett's most famous absurdist drama, Waiting for Godot, from 1952. Here, only one tree remains from the alley, like an anchor, an uncertainly, and even a nothingness, and silent witness to waiting, and ultimately a non-human actor embodying and a seed of hope. Beckett introduces the drama with laconic stage directions. A country road, a tree, evening. The road with a single tree is a symbol. Every road leads somewhere, or at least it should, creating the illusion of a transitional space, but this time without any real transition. The tree is a K symbol. It is the only visible object in the empty space, even though at first it appears to be dead. I cite Vladimir, what is it? Estragon. It is a tree. Vladimir. What does it say to you? Estragon. Nothing. Vladimir. It looks like a dead tree. Even so, it can be more than just physical support for the characters. However, at the beginning of the second act, it turns out that it is alive. Vladimir. Leaves. Estragon. Leaves. Vladimir. On the tree. Estragon. Are they new? Vladimir. I'm asking you, Estragon. It must be spring. The tree is covered with leaves. Symbolically, in the static atmosphere of waiting, it is the only tangible proof that time is actually passing in drama. A sign of a natural cycle, spring, a possible hint of hope, but ultimately it doesn't change the situation. Godot still doesn't come. The waiting continues. There is a cruel irony in this, a change that could herald something is meaningless. Nevertheless, in all this inactivity and rigidity, this place is a moment when the active actor in the drama is a tree. We can therefore also call it a non-human actor. Beckett also relativizes any meaning and possibility of self-reflection of the characters by referring to the frailty of their memory. When change comes, the tree grows leaves. They are almost unable to recognize it with certainty. The tree is a serious and ironic reminder of the characters' despair and inability to act in any way. Soon after the beginning, and then again during the play, they consider hanging themselves from it. Estragon. Let's hang ourselves immediately. Vladimir. From above? Estragon. We can always try. Vladimir. Go ahead. Estragon. After you. Vladimir. No, no, you first. Estragon. Why me? Vladimir. You are lighter than I am. However, these are just empty words again. The tree thus also represents a symbol of possible death, or rather a place of waiting where even death doesn't occur. Its presence thus underscores the absurd of endless state of waiting and indecision that is the heart of the play. And let me make some some conclusion. So these examples described above shows that trees are and have historically been carriers of powerful, meaningful scenic metaphors, whether in contemporary performances, where their thematization and symbolism are often linked to environmental and identity meanings, Or in the past, when trees in dramas and their presentations on stage also functioned as powerful metaphors. Their meaning was often also identity-related, symbolizing roots, certainty, and tradition. They even became non-human actors, challengers, means of confrontations, bearers of change and hope. So these are just some examples of metaphors of trees in arts, and I just want to thank you for your attention now.